I mean, truly the power of life and death is in the tongue. So what you speak over that relationship will be. And you speak life and connection with honor. Like that's what I said first. Honor what was. Like honor your grief, honor your sadness. You need to sit in that. You need to write out everything that season was to you and all those special memories and moments. Like soak that in. Even if it'll come out in tears. It'll come out in.
That's so good though.
So much emotion, but you have to even experience, you have to hold grief and joy in the same hands.
You are listening to the Famous at Home podcast with Dr. Josh and Christi Straub.
Because when it's all said and done, we all want to know that we were famous at home. Welcome back to the Famous at Home podcast. We've got your questions, and I don't know that we have answers, but we have our discussion around your questions, because some of these questions I feel like are... Okay, so there's a number of different things. Number one is there's questions about toddlers, and we are in the toddler season, so we're actually living some of this out. We've also been through the toddler season with our almost 11 and 9-year-old, so we've been through that, navigated that. We're in the middle childhood years with those kids. And then there's questions about teenagers. And I mean, I've worked with teenagers in the past. That was where my counseling basically got started, working with juvenile delinquents, troubled teenagers. And so I have experience doing that, but I don't have experience necessarily raising teenagers quite yet, although we're inching that direction. But we're going to tackle some of these questions today on the podcast. We appreciate you guys. We're in this kind of series right now where we're doing that. I do want to say this. If you could go and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts, that would be fantastic. That's how people find out about it, and see, hey, like these guys actually know what they're talking about, or maybe we don't know what we're talking about, but at least you and like, I don't know, maybe we're just relatable. Like friends, and we just tackle tough topics. I like when
people say that. They're like, I feel like you're our friends. And I'm like, I love that. I love that great. You feel that way. That's like absolutely what we want. And that's what you need. I mean, don't we all need like a friend talking to us that like makes you feel like you really do have what it takes.
And one thing we really do enjoy is interacting with you guys. So like even last week's episode with Sissy Goff, I hope you guys really enjoyed her. Like she was amazing. We did have some technical issues with the video. So unfortunately that did not make it to YouTube. But we did the audio recording work great. But if you like, even that, like if you have questions, like send them into us. We love getting questions and feedback. And that's what's sparking a lot of the conversations we're having right now. This week, we're doing some Q&A. Next week is fighting for peace in your home, which I'm really, really excited about that episode. Fantastic question about that. There's lots of questions about that, which led to that. And then we have some exciting announcements coming up too, which we're really, big deal. All right. So, Christi,
I'm like stretching. Yeah.
Let's get to it.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to tackle this one first because maybe I can kind of go from age on up here. So would love to hear you talk about toddlers and discipline. And now let me say this. We could do a whole episode on toddlers and discipline if we wanted to.
And yet I feel like sometimes we look at each other and we're like, what this is, I don't remember this. I don't remember the other two acting like this.
Well,
why is this one acting like this?
I do, but I also feel like I think we tend to overemphasize their behavior. Yeah. And I think it's because their behavior is so big. Remember, like the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's responsible for self-control, emotion regulation, cognitive flexibility, that part of the brain is not developed in toddlers. And I think so often what we tend to do as parents is we can tend to come in big and hard and charging when our toddlers are so emotionally overwhelmed. They're defiant, yes, but we don't but we come in with our amygdala going off, like our fight, flight, and freeze, because we talked about this with Sissy last week, where it's like we rise to the occasion, which only raises our toddlers up even more. By the way, this goes for teenagers or anybody. Everybody, if you didn't listen to the episode with Sissy, everybody in the house is going to elevate to that level.
And I loved how she said it. It's like when one amygdala gets tripped, they all go. And I thought I've never heard someone say it that way, but that's exactly what happens, right? So it's like being around, we're talking about anxiety or worry, but that can look like fear. It can look like anger, anything where you're living in fight or flight or freeze is this, it's almost like this drug, right? It's like this addictive thing that causes everyone else to go to that level. And I find it's such an interesting thing for like a parent, because if a child is not fully developed brain, they flip their lid all the time and quickly, like there's no filter there. So it's just like boom. And for us, if we're not, I don't want to say careful because it's not like it's about being careful, but if we're don't have tools on board to be able to regulate ourselves, we're going to flip our lid as they do. We might have a little bit of a buffer, but when it talks about like a long fuse where it takes someone a long time to blow, I think what we're really trying to do is develop in ourselves a longer fuse so that when our kids, like our toddlers, are flipping theirs all the time, having this longer fuse built up over time, which is like really developing this ability to regulate yourself. And that's not just to like be devoid of emotion and not feel. Like there's some people that you can get into the freeze state where you're just like numb. And so someone else's emotional outburst, you're just like, whatever. That you hear that lack of warmth though. And we actually talked about that last week. This like, I don't care. That's not helpful to a toddler or any person whose lid is flipped either. What they're looking for is warmth. They're looking for understanding, and they're wanting some sort of compassion, because something to them is so overwhelming that they feel like the amygdala flips when it feels like it does not have the tools or the capacity to deal with this. So it's like I either have to get super big and just explode. That's screaming, kicking, punching, like scratching, whatever that looks like for a toddler. I don't know that we've had all of those things.
No, but I tell you,
has he scratched?
Yeah, he scratches, but
yeah.
But
anyway,
but not in like a. He does it when he wrestles, but he doesn't know any better. So
yeah.
like,
that's what I'm saying.
Let me just say this though: your fuse has gotten longer since Landon.
Thanks.
You're completely you don't. Like, I think with Landon, you were of the mindset that if we didn't do something in the moment, our son was going to turn out to end up in jail. Like that was your, and I think so often that's how we end up with our toddlers is it's like, and Sissy talked about this last week. It's like, we stay stuck in the moment and we put context for the moment. Like if my toddler does not listen to me today and doesn't sit at the table and doesn't, speak respectfully to me.
Or reacts this way, like throws a fit when I tell them no, then like
they're going to end up in jail.
Right.
They're never going to drive a car. They're going to,
or even just like our life is going to be miserable because he is going to be like this for the rest of his life.
And I would say this,
always endure
in
this.
the toddler years, at 3 range, 2, they call it terrible twos. I think 3, my experience is it tends to be 3, is hard. Like it is a very difficult season. And here's how we tackle it. I'm just going to explain how we tackle it. And a lot of I don't want to get into too many details because we could do a whole episode on this. I'm going to get to some of the other topics, but this sets the stage for everything else we talk about. There's a very distinct reason behind what we do. And that is that our kids, and I think this is very biblical, that our kids feel seen, that our kids feel loved. Go to Psalm 103. I read about this in Safe House. Psalm 103, where it says the Father is abounding in steadfast love. He is slow to anger. He's abounding in steadfast love. He will not always chide or blame. He doesn't treat us as our sins deserve. He's not going to say, you know what, you ruined my day, I'm ruining yours. We're not going to the park, right? Or whatever, right? It's like and he doesn't keep his anger forever. So it's like, now, does he get angry? Sure. But I think the Father tends to get angry not at us as his kids, but what could happen to us if we continued in our behavior. And I think that's a flip that we need to switch, is going, I'm going to get angry at what could happen to you if you continued in this behavior. And so much of that is us maintaining our own, as parents, emotional regulation. And us creating a culture, us creating an environment. That's what Proverbs 22:6 is all about. Raise a child in the way that they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. That proverb is about the environment of the home. And I think when we prioritize the environment of the home, I'll give you an example of this. And you play the long game. You have to play the long game. Do not look at this do not put this contextually into today's the worst day of my life. My son or daughter, my toddler is never going to change. They're going to be, no, that's not true. What is true is that they're in a difficult season where their brain isn't fully developed yet, and they have to learn how to fit into the culture of your home. And what we have to be careful of is not allowing our toddlers to dictate the culture of our home.
Josh.
Instead, we dictate the culture of our home, and they have to learn how to fit in it. Now, will that disrupt the culture of your home? Absolutely it will. So we're having dinner, and our toddler, our 3-year-old, doesn't want to have dinner, right? He's like, or he's up and down, and he's causing all kinds of headaches, and then it's like, no, Micah, sit to the table. No. Okay. No, you say, yes, sir. I'll give you one warning, one mulligan. Try again. No. Okay. Now you disrespected your father. Now you're going to timeout. So he screams. He loses his mind. I take him to timeout, which is it's in the same, we're not in the same room, but the room next door, it's an open area. So, he can, he knows right where we are, where he's listening to us talk, where he's right there, but he's losing his ever-loving mind. And I tell him, now, granted, in this moment, what you tell him is not going to register because he's losing his mind. So I just simply state, we say yes, sir, to dad. Yes, ma'am, to mom. So he goes to timeout, losing his mind. I go back and I have dinner. He's losing his mind. We continue to have dinner as a family. And we continue to laugh. We continue to enjoy. He's screaming in the background. And after about 2 minutes, I go back to him and I hold him and I hug him. And I'm just holding him because he needs to be calmed down. He needs to learn that there's a distance because of his behavior, but he also needs to realize that, so there has to be truth, but it also has to be a lot of grace. So I'm doing everything I can, and I don't always do this perfectly, but to not get angry at him, but to continue to go into his world, to hold him in my arms. And then as I hold him in my arms, he physically begins to calm down. Telling your toddler to calm down when they're losing their mind and that you won't come get them until they calm down is like, it's negotiating with terrorists. They don't understand. In fact, that in a lot of ways just makes them go up. Now, we do have to teach them to take deep breaths and to calm down, but when they're that overwhelmed, one of the only ways that I know is to hold them. And once I hold him, then all of a sudden he starts to think straight. And I'll say, can you say yes, sir, dad? Yes, sir, dad. But he feels remorseful, and then we go out and we apologize to mom and we start back over again, right? So does it take work? Does it take extra time? Absolutely. But we shepherd. You're going to shepherd your 15-year-old, you're going to shepherd your 11-year-old, your 8-year-old, and your 3-year-old all differently depending on their gender, depending on their age, depending on their maturity level. And each one of them is going to require a different amount of time and energy. And the time and energy, there are some parents that the time and energy it takes to discipline a toddler is so much easier than it is an 11-year-old. But for many of us, it's easier to parent an 11-year-old than it is a toddler. But you have to find that for you and know, okay, where do I need to really lengthen my fuse and really understand we're creating a culture of safety, emotional safety, and I need to not flip my lid because my child's flipping their lid, and I need to pay attention and hold them and enter into their world when they're flipping their lid.
It's good. It's so good. A couple of things came up for me as you're talking. I think expectations are really big with any type of relationship with our kids, no matter the age. But I think so often, especially if it's your first child, at least for me, it was like you have these expectations that your child will XYZ, whatever. And it's shocking to you that like a toddler would throw a fit. Like you're put in a corner. I don't know. My expectation was that you would just stand there and then you'll apologize to me and we'll come back, And it's, I think, altering expectations where you realize you are going to scream. You are going to flip your lid. And some kids don't. Like Kennedy, our second, she wasn't like this really at all. So it's not, I'm saying when people are talking about toddler behavior, I'm assuming it's because they're struggling with tantrums, which a lot of kids do have. And I don't think we should like put like all this pride on it. Like, oh, people are like, well, my child will never do that. And God bless you if you've said that, because I found that when you tell God that you will never, or I will never, he often humbles us pretty much every time. But
we'll talk about that in a few weeks.
Yeah, we can talk about that. But it was true even with our kids. Like, it was like, this can't be this hard. But when you alter expectations, realize like they truly don't have the capacity or the control on board yet. And you get to be part of them mirroring yours. The trouble is when what they're doing is so overwhelming to your system. And I think that's what's helpful in changing the expectations is like, this is going to sound really funny, but sometimes when I get super overwhelmed, I under my breath, because I'm not trying to exacerbate it. But I'll be like, when like a kid's crying, because it's almost like I'm taking part in it. So it's not just coming at me like this tidal wave that's about to like engulf me, because sometimes like that's what it feels like. Like that's why if you even hear a baby crying on a plane or at a restaurant and everyone is like, ugh, like everyone gets activated. That's the whole point of the noise. But if you participate in it, it actually sort of knocks it down a few notches, because you're releasing some of all of that, I want to say anger, but whatever that is, frustration, energy, also you're participating in it. So it's partially released for you, which helps regulate your nervous system. But it also makes you feel like there's a bit of humor to it, because you're like crying like a baby. Again, I really try not to do it like for Micah, like in his face, because then he thinks I'm like making fun of him. And
right. Yeah. You got to be careful of that.
That makes it way worse. But there's a part of it that just adds its bit of humor that gets you out of fight or flight, where you're able to see it from a distance. And the only other thing I will say is, if at all possible, if you can look at this situation as if you are like decades in the future when these kids are gone, that's gonna make me cry, and you are in your 70s or 80s and it's just you and your spouse at home, and to look at the situation as if you were remembering back, remember that time when he stood in the corner and he jumped up and down and he threw a fit because he wouldn't, his meat was cut wrong or whatever. And you start to see the humor of it's really not urgent. It's really not that big of a deal. And you see it from that perspective, and you're just like, all of a sudden you have a grace you didn't know you had. And you can look at that child and be like, hey, bud. Yeah. Okay. Like, and again, reasoning with them at that time is not even worth your time. But when it's time, you can.
I'm a huge fan of just holding them. I think holding them is what leads to a teachable moment. And, you might say, hey, well, where's the discipline in that? I mean, there's discipline over time, because he learns that he doesn't get certain things unless he says, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no, sir, no, ma'am. If he's hitting, if he's doing those things, there are consequences for those things, but you can't teach those consequences when they're absolutely losing their ever-loving mind.
Well, and I think the thing is they still don't win. They still don't get their way. They still don't get what they're wanting because of their acting.
They're not getting their way. Yep.
No, you sometimes I'll just hold him on his shoulders, just that pressure of just containment, because they are losing it and they feel so out of control. They need someone to help them
get back into control. Right.
And they slowly learn that to do it on their own over time. But containment, where you hold not like you're suffocating them, or you're like holding them down
in a loving way, but in a firm, loving way. Yeah.
But that's very calming actually for the body. And I had another thought now.
We're 20 minutes in and we got one question.
Oh, one other thing. Make sure your word is as good as gold. So if you say, you stand up one more time, like that's what we've learned over time. Like a toddler has to know that they can trust what you say, like the consequence will happen. And it's not going to be like, okay, I'm going to give you one more chance, because all that does is denigrate your authority. And that's them. It's like a lottery. It's like they're winning, because they're like, hey, maybe if I try one more time, I'll get it again. And then it's just exhausting for you, because you just are like running this, hamster wheel again and again. So,
and I'm gonna do another question here, because I want to cover some of these questions, but that question alone sets the foundation. So if you're just jumping in because you saw this episode was going to talk about different topics and you're like, oh, divorce is in the title or whatever we decide to put in the title, don't fast forward to this without listening to what we just talked about with toddlers and discipline.
You might have said that at the beginning because maybe they've already fast forwarded. Just thought.
Well, I didn't realize that until now, but I'm like, I don't want you to fast forward. So if you're in this part of the episode,
if you have fast forward, just rewind a little bit.
That's what I mean. Go back to the beginning because the reason is I need you to go back to the beginning because what we just talked about with toddlers and discipline sets the foundation for everything that we do as parents. The way that we enter their world, that we hold them, that we help them calm down their overwhelming brain. And so this question is, I need any and all info on supporting, loving, and helping kiddos through navigating the complex and potentially devastating effects of divorce. And I as a child of divorce myself, I can tell you that one of the most significant factors for me in navigating that as a child was having loving, present parents who did not undermine each other. And so I'm going to go back to what Christi just said. When your kids are overwhelmed, so let me say this. When you have your children, so again, they could be at the other parent's house, they could be at your house. Let's assume they're at your house. When they are at your house, the culture of your home is everything. As Christi just said, let your word be as true as gold. If you're going to take them for ice cream at some point, take them for ice cream. Like, do not make promises you cannot keep. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. I think that's a big one because they need consistency. Kids going through divorce need consistency. Kids going through divorce also need to realize it's not their fault that this is happening. And they need ongoing support from you as a parent to enter into their world and help. This is not just about you. This divorce is not about you. This is about the kids too. And the kids a lot of times are left in the wake because of it. And so tucking them into bed at night, having dinner with them, entering into their world and just saying, how are you? Or what was a highlight of your day? What was the most exciting thing that happened to you today? What was a very difficult part of your day? What was a part that you didn't look back on with fondness? What did you learn today? Those types of questions enter into your child's world and make it about them. And that's what they need during this season. Anytime that there's loss, anytime that there's grief, anytime that there's a circumstance going on in their world that they can't understand, getting loving support around them as much as you possibly can, but you entering into their world as the parent. And no matter how nasty your divorce is, no matter how nasty the other person is being to you, do not speak ill about your child's other parent to the child. That is just not helpful. Now, there comes a point when they hit a certain age where they will start to see what is and what isn't helpful in regard to behavior. You shall know them by their fruit is what the Bible says. Mm-hmm. And I think you let the fruit over time. You don't be the one who's criticizing and cutting people up and gossiping and doing that type of thing. Let the fruit of other people and the way they live their lives manifest itself so that people just see it. That's the point.
That's good, but that's got to be so hard. Like, I just can imagine would be. But
here's the thing.
So
you can talk about and how your ex-spouse is influencing your life for the negative, but you go do that with a therapist. You go do that with a friend.
Good, Josh.
You don't do that with your kids. Yeah. That's the key here. That's how you navigate that. And anything we talk about safe house related, the book Famous at Home, where we talk about building emotional safety within the context of the home, that's key. The more that you can cultivate that culture in your home, because you only have control what's going on in your home. You have no control of what's going on in your ex-spouse's home. Now, if you have some influence in terms of, you guys talking and you're on the same team and you have the privilege of having an ex-spouse who's like, hey, let's get on the same team with the kids. That's beautiful. That's win-win right there. That's a huge win. And my parents did that, I think, pretty stinking well. At least from my experience in going through a divorce, because I don't remember there being any. It was pretty cordial. Like, I don't even remember my parents arguing with each other like before the divorce. That took me by surprise. That was where I the most difficult part for me was I had no clue. Like, it just happened. And I was like, wait a minute, we were just at the beach on a vacation the week before. So, so I think that was the part that devastated me the most, is it just came as a shock. And then, so, but my parents were there. My parents were present. And so.
Did they check in on you?
I believe so. Like, I don't know that they were, I don't think they were like, hey, what was your positive emotion? What was your negative emotion? What was your, point to they certainly didn't say point to this feelings chart, and, but they were. There's a
great kids book about that, though.
But they were, but present. Yeah. For sure. Like, I can count on one hand the number of wrestling matches my dad missed, growing up through my teen years. Like, he was always there, always in the stands.
I can imagine though how difficult that is to, just for the emotional turmoil that, as mom and dad are going through, for them to be present. So how would you suggest, like you said, talking to a friend or a therapist, but like, how do you separate that? Because even like we were talking about with Sissy last week, when you get in that state of fear and self-protection, you lose the warmth, you lose the joy.
Yeah.
How do you fake, we're not asking you to fake that for your kids, but how do you, how can you speak to that?
I think at the end of the day, we have to level up. It's exactly what we were talking about with Sissy last week. If you didn't listen to that episode, I really encourage you to go back and listen to that. But it's who we're becoming as adults, right? And in the beginning of Famous at Home, I tell my story where my dad was always in the stands, but in big emotional moments of my life, he didn't know how to show up because his father hadn't shown up for him. And so there were these big emotional moments that I didn't know how to navigate. He knew how to be physically present, but there wasn't this sense of big emotional, like, navigating these big situations. But I don't know that he knew how. And I think part of that is we have to learn how to do those things. And the only way we're going to learn how to do those things is to humble ourselves and say, I need to surround myself with other authentic humans, whether that's a therapist, a coach, a pastor, people within the context of your church who, women's ministry or men's ministry or that type of thing. Like, you're finding people who are who will help you navigate this well. And who, by the way, also will help you navigate it and help you become a survivor, not a victim in the circumstance. So we don't want to just become people who just speak ill will towards another human who's hurt us over and over and over and over and over and over again, where it's just like we stay stuck there. But where people who are helping us learn who are listening to us, who are meeting us in our pain, but also helping us understand the importance of forgiving that person so that we can move on and thrive in our lives rather than staying stuck in that situation, or staying stuck in that and that's hard. Like, the things we're talking about right now are not easy to do in the moment.
But think about, like, just the power of that modeling of the parent even going through the trauma for themselves of a divorce and the emotional, just absolute upheaval. But to be able to pass that resilience on to their kids, we're not faking it. We're not just like burying this and plowing forward, but you're actually like to move from victim to survivor. And like, think about what that translates to your kids, what they're actually seeing without you saying any words to them.
Yeah. And inviting your kids
powerful.
Into that journey. I think inviting your kids into the journey. So, for example, what I mean by that is you invite them into the journey that you have already been through. So you're not putting your emotional chaos onto your kids or the burden onto your kids. And I mean, this goes for all of us. This isn't just a divorce situation. It goes for all of us. Like, another question is this, and we can talk more specifically about this in the coming weeks, but talking about byproducts of life transitions, like moving from homeschooling to public school, a feeling of loss of relationship, maybe friendships because you've moved into another school, or you moved neighborhoods, or whatever that looks like.
It's interesting. I read that as if that's a transition from homeschool to public, the loss of relationship.
And that's where that question did come in. I do totally remember that.
That's a mom missing
That's
her kids.
A mom missing her kids.
Yeah.
Yep. Moving from homeschooling to public school. That's exactly what that is. That is 100% what that is. Let's talk about that here in a second. Okay. So, because that's the same, it's still the same thing. This is also, it's a mom losing the homeschooling relationship, but you also have a mom or a dad losing the relationship with the child's parents. Yeah. You have a loss of relationship with the adult that would affect the children. And in that situation, I think what really is most critical for us is that we not that we invite our kids. I'm trying to say this well, so because we're going through difficulties, we're going through pain, and we want to be authentic, but we don't want to put that burden onto our kids. And so we want to invite our kids into the processes that we have already worked through. So in other words, we've already resolved certain situations, so that when our children, as we're saying, hey, what was the most difficult part of your day? Or what do you need right now? I really miss daddy. Let's say the child's with mom and I really miss daddy. Oh, that's really hard. Tell me more about that. What do you miss about daddy? I miss when we, I don't know, my daughter and I love to draw. I miss drawing with daddy. Okay, so would you like to draw with me? No, I don't want to draw. I don't want to draw with you, Mom. I miss daddy. You know what? You know what I do when I miss someone dearly, just like you're missing daddy, is we could pick up the phone and call them. I've also been through a situation where it's really hard when I can't talk to that person because my situation, maybe my dad died. I can't call my dad. But what I do is I go back and I look at pictures, or I write a letter to him, or I do X, Y, and Z, whatever that is. So I'm inviting my child into a way that I not push down my sadness, but that I enter into my sadness in ways that it has worked for me. So what we're doing is we're inviting our kids into coping mechanisms that have worked for us and coping skills that have worked for us, and we're teaching our kids how to do that.
So good. I know we're running out of time. Do you want to move to the homeschool one real quick?
Let's do it.
It wasn't a homeschool question necessarily.
Well, it's the same thing.
I mean, even in the situation of divorce, it's loss of a relationship with your child if the child's splitting time, right? It's this missing of our kids when we've been used to. Think about it in the preschool years. Maybe you were home with the kids and then you're sending them to school. It's the same dynamic of, or even as your kids just age and they are off doing activities and entering into sort of the social scene once they can drive, and it's this missing and longing for your children and missing that relationship. And I think the one thing I have been most encouraged, because I feel this, what is that foreboding joy where you fear it?
Yeah. Brene Brown talks about foreboding joy.
I haven't lost it yet in this way. We still feel called, for example, to homeschool. So I am not in this exact situation, but I have this foreboding joy of this happening in the future when they decide to, get married or move away or start a business or go to college or whatever. And it's like, I fear this feeling. So I feel this.
So what ends up happening is you engage in behaviors that allow you to not experience joy in the moment because you're fearing that happening.
Exactly.
You're pushing joy. You just keep pushing joy down the road to the point that you never experience true joy in the moment and then what ends up happening is it's a close cousin, I think, to what's the phrase for it?
I know exactly what you're trying to say.
Oh my goodness, why am I blanking on it? When the very thing that you don't want to happen happens.
Really struggling.
Oh my word, why am I blanking on it? The psychology phrase of we're going to get this.
Almost had it.
Why am I blanking all of a sudden? It's the very thing that you don't want to have happen that happens. All right, we'll move on. We'll remember it. But I'm gonna get the phrase.
I'm either gonna wake it up in the middle of the night.
Before we close.
Oh, I almost had it. I mean, it's like a prophetic, but it's not. It's like speaking into existence.
You keep talking about it. I'm going to go find it. You go ahead.
No, don't.
Okay.
What was the point? So you're speaking.
You're not sitting with your kids because you're worried about what's going to end up happening to them.
Yeah. And I think let's just take a look at this first. I think we, just like you were saying, this is not stuffing this feeling. This is actually healthily dealing with this sadness that comes from the loss of that you're experiencing. And I think just bravo to this sweet mom who's voicing how much she misses her kids, or she's preparing for what will feel like a loss if they're transitioning. And I think if I were sitting with you, I would want to spend time. It's going to get me emotional actually saying this, but just honoring the sadness, honoring what was, like, in order to enter into this new season, for whatever reason you feel called to it, whatever reason, you have to honor the season that you had. And the quality of your hellos is dependent upon the quality of your goodbyes. And this is a goodbye. It's a transition season. But I will say, the hope that I have clung to from mothers that have gone before me, like that are decades ahead of me, that have done this, and I'll say it as succinctly is that it just keeps getting better. Don't hold to the belief that it was as good as it was going to get. I hear so many moms who are so grief ridden over, like, the baby years being over, the toddler years. Oh, they're not dependent on me. Oh, like, everything's changing. And I really believe self-fulfilling prophecy.
It was in my brain. Self-fulfilling prophecy. It was in my brain. I had it. I was waiting for you to finish.
I
didn't want to interrupt you.
Okay.
I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh,
we got it. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in that the very thing that you don't want to have happen happens because your behavior makes it happen. You get clingy with your kids. You get overly enmeshed with them, and they finally get to a place where they're like, I need space. I'm 18. I get to get out of here. Like, get me out of here.
Or it's like, you see everything in the past is rosy colored glasses, and everything in the future is just like a pit of despair. Cause it's like, that was the best it was going to, like, that was the best. And now it's like, I had one friend whose mom would speak over her. She's like, teenagers, like, just wait till your kids become teenagers. She's like, they don't want nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with you. It's what happened with you kids. I knew it was coming. And when you guys got to teenage, you wanted nothing to do with me, and it's going to happen to you. And I was like, in the name of Jesus, you cut that off, because that is, it's a spoken word curse. You're literally speaking it into existence. And so if you're believing that the former years were better than the future, then I don't believe you're listening to the God of the Bible, who says, like, he is making everything new. And so the hope that we cling to is that it just keeps getting better. The richness of our relationship just keeps getting better. Even if they're going off to school, it's not a loss of relationship. It's almost like a blossoming of one, right? It's maybe a little bit less time, but it's a difference in maybe quality, and it's a blooming. It's not a dying or a shriveling. And if we buy into the lie that it's dying and it's shriveling, it will shrivel and die. And if we buy into the belief that it's just growing deeper and richer, like, I don't live near my family. I haven't lived near my mom or my sister or my brother in almost 2 decades. And yet when we are together, like, our relationship is, my sister just sent this video of my brother dancing this morning. Like, I mean, I look at it, and it, like, I am so filled with life and joy and the connections that we have. Like, you can't take that away from me. And it's only gotten better, even though it's less quantity of time. So truly the power of life and death is in the tongue. So what you speak over that relationship will be. And you speak life and connection with honor. Like, that's what I said first. Honor what was. Like, honor your grief, honor your sadness. You need to sit in that. You need to write out everything that season was to you, and all those special memories and moments. Like, soak that in. Even if it'll come out in tears. It'll come out in.
That's so good, though.
So much emotion, but you have to even experience. You have to hold grief and joy in the same hands in order to fully experience joy. You can't.
I remember Bill talking about that.
Yeah. And so in order to really cherish what you have had, and then also anticipate with hope what is to come, you need to be able to do both. And so bless you, Mama, because it's a beautiful journey. It's a hard journey. A lot of people bypass that journey because it hurts. Like, you hear, like, I have emotion in my voice talking about it because I feel it. Like, I know what she's talking about. And yet this is when Jesus says he comes to give us life to the full, this is what full life looks like. If you want to live a dead life, a numb life, that's what the world and the enemy is trying to sell. And it looks pretty good from the outside because it's numb and it's surface and it's cold. And you'll get to the end of it and realize you didn't live it at all.
That's a word. That's a way to end. So if you didn't listen to the beginning, go back and listen to the beginning, because this is it just sets the stage. And we can talk about this another time as well, but that try softer is like that Sissy talked about last week. With all of this, as we enter into our toddler years, as we enter into our kids' worlds, no matter their age, going through divorce, as we enter into their world and pay attention to our world, as we send them from homeschooling to public school, or the transition of whatever that looks like, I think at the end of the day, we can wrap all this up into who are we becoming as parents? How are we showing up for them? And what does that look like? And so keep sending in your questions. Keep sending it. Next week, we will be covering just one main topic. We're not going to be doing like a Q&A type episode. We're going to be doing just one main topic on fighting for peace in your home. We're going to really talk about the culture of your home. So until then, keep in mind that the greatest red carpet you will walk is through your front door.
Keep being famous at home. We love you.